Give us the journey around coconut water.
I'm a terrible operator. Following, piggybacking off of that model where like, wow, I can come up with an idea and partner with a company that has an expertise and I could just be a marketing arm for them. I went to Coca-Cola with this idea for coconut water and a PowerPoint.
Jesse, where does this podcast find you?
Atlanta, Georgia, where I live.
Atlanta, nice. So let's bust right into it. Give us your kind of origin story, Jesse. Walk us through your background and how you ended up doing what you've done.
I've had a very unconventional journey and worn a lot of different hats. I started out in the music business right out of college. I went to school in DC at American University. I was signed to a record label called Delicious Vinyl. And that didn't go great for me. I ended up getting dropped from the label and I started doing theme songs for sports teams, like the Knicks theme song, which is called Go New York Go, bunch of other teams, and ultimately started a music marketing company that I sold to a public company. And then, I'm a big runner. I've done a lot of long distance ultra races, and when I was training for a 100-mile race, I discovered coconut water in 2006, 7. Ended up partnering with a coconut water company called Zico, which we sold to Coca-Cola, and then just had a bunch of wrote a book, had 4 kids, got married, moved from New York to Atlanta, and really just followed things that I love to do and launched a bunch of businesses. Some worked and some didn't. And here I am.
So let's go through the businesses. What was sort of your approach to starting businesses? Which ones worked? Which ones didn't? And if you could draw a line through or try and find signal from the noise in terms of why companies worked or didn't work, what would that signal be?
Well, jumping right to that point, I think at the end of the day, usually for me, it's come down to management. And that's not hiring people that could take my idea and bring it to fruition. I think the best ideas, if they don't have good leaders and good managers, will struggle. And, you know, Scott, I really enjoyed my 20s, man. I tried a lot of different things. I slept on 18 different couches from 18 to 22, different friends putting me up, going couch to couch, trying different businesses. I sold carrot and celery sticks door to door. I was a kiddie pool attendant. I cleaned pools. I sold meat, chicken, and door to door. I just tried so many different things. When I was 28 years old, I was a guest on a private jet. And when I walked onto the private jet, it was like the scene in The Wizard of Oz when everything in life goes from black and white to color. And I was like, people fly like this? This is insane. I want to fly like this. And that's how we got the idea to start this company called Marquis Jet. I think a lot of the businesses that I've been involved with, some which worked, many more which didn't work. Entrepreneurs can do two things. They can make something better or they can create something new. And they were all the businesses that I've been involved with were a function of just identifying things that fit one of those 2 categories, either like, "Wow, like, I'm a runner, I would love what's the natural healthy way to get electric?" Like, coconut water emerged through necessity and need, and just keeping my eyes open for things that would make my life easier or better, and that's how those ideas popped into my head.
So talk about Marquis Jet. What gave you the vision? I mean, it's not easy to start a explain the concept, how it differentiated from other fractional companies or owning a plane, and what was your niche in the marketplace, and walk us through kind of what happened there.
Yeah, well, at the time that we started this company, which is around the year 2000, 99, 2000, there were really only 3 ways to fly privately. You could buy your own airplane, which was incredibly expensive. You could charter a plane, where there are a lot of inconsistencies. Who's flying the airplane? How old is the airplane? Who's managing the airplane? Or you could buy a fraction of an airplane, which also is a long-term commitment and a lot of money. And that's what NetJets was doing and FlexJet and other fractional jet companies. And I couldn't afford any of those options, and they weren't realistic for me. I wanted to take 2 or 3 flights a year with some friends, treat my parents, maybe a business trip. So our idea was a 25-hour, basically debit card. You prepay for 25 hours, put like 50 or 100 grand down for 25 hours, and if you fly 2, you have 23 hours left. You didn't have to own the plane was available on short notice. And you're right, we had no aviation experience, and we had no airplanes, and we had no money, but we went to the 800-pound gorilla, NetJets, which had 650 planes, the largest private jet fleet in the world, and owned by Warren Buffett. And we pitched them this idea of a 25-hour jet card, and because we needed airplanes. And the CEO, Rich Santulli, threw my partner and I out of that meeting in 12 minutes and literally said, if you think I'm giving two 28-year-old kids who probably didn't break 1,000 on their SATs access to my planes, that's not going to happen, and kicked us out. And the president grabbed us and said, wait a second, I think there's something here. I want you guys to come back and repitch this next week. I'm going to set up a follow-up meeting. I want to hear more. We came back a week later and we brought in our own focus group, and we literally set up 8 chairs in the boardroom, and one by one, 8 people, a powerful real estate mogul from New York, a sports agent, they stood up and said they would never buy a fraction, but they would buy a 25-hour jet card. And ultimately, we got a deal to use their planes and put our program under the NetJet fleet. So our niche was catering to an audience that couldn't afford to buy their own plane. We made private aviation more affordable to the masses, and it worked.
NetJets, I would think, would want to do it in hopes that they could get people addicted to this and then move them up to fractional. Is that accurate?
That's 100% accurate. We were a marketing arm, and yes, we were a farm system for their larger fractional program.
And so tell me about the industry now in terms of fractional. How would you differentiate between kind of give us a lay of the land and how the market, that business has evolved? And eventually Berkshire slash NetJets bought you out, correct?
Yeah, so I've been out of it for almost 13 years now, so I don't follow the industry super close. I'm just a customer, but I know a lot. It's a really difficult, capital-intensive business, Scott. I think when we started, there were like 50 companies that put a flag in the ground that said they were in the private jet space, and like 2 were profitable. It's a really hard business to survive in. NetJets had the luxury of having, being backed by Berkshire. So they built an incredible infrastructure. But now, 13 years later, I'm not 100% sure how it's evolved, but it's a lot of the same. It's still kind of buy your own plane, travel, buy a fraction of a plane, charter, or some kind of card or one-off program.
And give us the journey around coconut water.
So my models, I'm not a great operator. I know what my weakness is. I'm a terrible operator, a much better marketer, idea guy, and piggybacking off of that model where like, wow, I can come up with an idea and partner with a company that has an expertise and I could just be a marketing arm for them. I went to Coca-Cola with this idea for coconut water and a PowerPoint and said, I want to get to the coconut water business. At this time, it was a very, very small category in beverage. And they said, we see this as an evolving area, but we don't buy PowerPoints. But if you find an existing company out there that's proven that they can source the product, sell the product, they're on the shelves, et cetera, and you come in to help market it, we'd love to be in business with you. So we went to a company called Zico Coconut Water that was doing about 2 or $3 million, maybe a little bit more in sales at the time. And we did a three-way deal. My group, my company, Zico, which existed, and Coca-Cola. And Coke had an option to buy 100% of the company down the road. And 2 years later, they executed that option. So we got it really hot, really fast. And we did that through PR, we had a lot of celebrity investors. The old model in beverage was we're going to pay people as endorsers, but the consumers pretty smart now and they see that. Our model was write us a check, be an investor, Mr. and Mrs. Celebrity, and help us promote it as an owner of the company. And that model worked. And now a lot of companies have followed suit off of that model.
I like the way that you define or you view success and luck. What has been your approach to putting yourself in situations where luck can find you?
Well, I think as an entrepreneur, a big part of it is luck. And
Agreed.
I've been super lucky and probably way more lucky than good, but I put myself in situations where I can attract that luck. I used to come home, Scott, from like, I walk into Marquis Jet and I'd be like, I got a sale last night. We had a bell. I would ring the bell. They'd be like, what do you mean? You were at the bar, the same bar I was at. I'm like, "Yeah, but you left at 11 o'clock. I stayed till 2, and I got the sale." "Oh, you're so lucky. The guy came." I'm not lucky. I put myself in that situation. Luck doesn't happen Sunday night watching the Kardashians on your couch. It happens when you put yourself in an environment where the universe can reward you for being there, and then you have to be good at what you do and take advantage of it. So, my 20s and 30s were built around putting myself in environments where I could get lucky.
So you do these Ultraman competitions, which are incredible feats of endurance. And I rode crew, and I think one of the things that's put me in a position of success is that, and as I'm sure I can't even imagine what it's like to run these distances or swim these distances. But in crew, it's basically who can endure the most pain. I mean, there's some technique, there's some strength, there's some fitness, but it's mostly an exercise and who's willing to endure the most pain. And I've always thought that's an enormous advantage for an entrepreneur. That when you think things couldn't get any worse and you just can't handle it anymore, what you learn, I would imagine, in the Ultraman and what I learned at crew is that when you think that, it means you're about a third of the way to your limit. And it always gave me a sense of comfort and confidence that I could keep going. Yeah, I'm curious what you think the relationship is between kind of what I'll call extreme fitness or extreme sports and entrepreneurship.
In 2006, I ran my first 100-mile race, and when I came back after that race, I got my office together and I said, "Double the business plan." The correlation, I mean, when you do something like that, you realize that the limits that we put on ourselves are pretty much self-imposed, and we have so much more in the tank than we thought we could. I mean, I started out running 2 miles, that was my goal, and nothing changed on my body. I'm still the same legs, same build. I'm not super strong. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed is I saw someone run a 100-mile race. I went to watch a 100-mile race in 2006, and there weren't a bunch of supermen that started at the starting line. People, in fact, weren't even that physically impressive. But what happened was they didn't stop. They just didn't stop. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a test of will. This is just will. Sign me up for this race and let me see how much will I have. And when I did the first 100-mile race, it changed everything in my life as it relates to entrepreneurship. Now, for starters, we talked about Marquis Jet briefly, but if they would have said to me, I was a kiddie pool attendant 5 years before I started Marquis Jet. I worked at a freaking kiddie pool, man. And 5 years later, we had this company that's doing 5 billion in sales. And if they would have said to me when I started Marquis Jet, you need Department of Transportation approval, you need FAA approval, you're gonna build a sales team, raise money, I would have been like, well, I said, what's the first thing, Scott? You said I needed Department of Transportation approval. There's got to be a lawyer that does that. Let me find that guy. Okay, we got what's the second thing I need? FAA approval. And I broke it down into digestible bites. It's the same thing with a 100-mile race or the Ultraman, or even I'm sure when you race crew going like flagpole to flagpole or tree to tree, you break it down into digestible bites. So there's a lot of similarities between how you approach a race like that and how you approach a startup business, especially if you have no entrepreneurial experience. My dad owned the plumbing supply house. We never talked about business. There was no, I had to kind of help figure it out and navigate it on my own, which actually became a blessing because it meant that I would do things differently than other people.
We'll be right back. You talk about the buckets of rich that you believe in, and I love that term buckets of rich, time rich, socially rich, spiritually rich, intellectually rich, purposefully rich, physically rich, and adventure rich. Can you walk us through those?
Yeah, there's an old acronym that they use as my parents were getting older. I did a lot of research around senior facilities. If I'm going to send my parents to a senior facility, and I stumbled upon an acronym that one of the centers used called SIPS, and it stands for social, intellectual, physical, purposeful, and spiritual. And what struck me as so interesting about that is that they didn't talk about Instagram followers, how many do you have, or the watch you wear, a car, like financial wasn't even a category. And they're grading your overall, like, the most important thing, your health, your wellness, your happiness. So I started to like think about my own. circle of friends and people that are wealthy or and even myself and like what are those buckets that I value the most? And they're the ones that you just said. Like, you can have all the money in the world, but if you're not time rich, how having the freedom to do what you want to do, or spiritually rich, or then there's an emptiness to your wealth. So that's sort of how I started to think about it. I invest a lot in how I spend my time, how I plan, how I think about time, being as good as I can be in the buckets that matter the most to me is a really good way to me to measure my success. My family, I have 4 kids, my friends, my relation, my business, my wellness, etc. How am I doing in those buckets?
What do you think about I like the saying, "You can have it all, you just can't have it all at once," because the time bucket, I have found, or at least I found, that if I wanted to have the money bucket full at some point, I'd have to sacrifice the time bucket, that I'd have to pretty much go all in on work for a certain amount of time. That certain buckets were just gonna know what the term is, run especially full or especially empty. I was never able to really strike a balance as a younger man and achieve any level of success. I know those people existed. I wasn't one of them. I found I had to go all in on something, or it just didn't work. And it came at a price. It came at a price of my relationships. I wasn't, it was worked out, but I probably wasn't as fit as I could have been or healthy as I could have been. But now I have a lot of that balance. I have a thesis, and that is young people think they can have it all. And I just don't think that's true. What are your thoughts about trying to manage balance at a young age and, all of these different buckets that sometimes are in opposition with each other?
Well, it's an individual decision. I think it varies depending, in my opinion, based on your age. So I think that I believed it was important to have your 20s. I saw a lot of my friends go from 20 to 50 like that because they were working on Wall Street in front of a computer all day. They were sacrificing life. They gave up their 20s. That your 20s are a time to try as many things as you can and see what you like to do and see what you're good at. And then master it in your 30s and get rich in your 40s. You're gonna make 5 to 10 times as much money, most people in their 40s and 50s than you will in your 20s. There's exceptions to the rule, but because you're gonna be smarter, you're gonna know more people, you're gonna be better at what you do. And I think a lot of people see on social media people getting wealthy quickly and think like, well, that's their story. And you can't compare yourself to that. There are people that do that. But I remember going to Coca-Cola in my 20s on the Zico meeting, and the president of Coke said to me, it's going to take 8 years to build this brand. It takes 8 years to build a brand in this country. I always remembered that, and it's gotten sped up a little now with the internet and everything, but it takes time. So I think, look, balance is tough. You always go I wasn't in balance when I ran my ultra marathon. I was training. You go in and out of balance, but that sacrifice and what you're willing to give up is important to remember. You don't get your 20s back. You don't get your 30s back. You don't get your kids growing up back. I have 4 kids now that are all under the age of 14, so I'm going through this right now. How much time do I want to spend at work and how much time do I want to spend with my kids?
What do you have any sort of guideposts as a dad to try and make sure that I mean, because I'm telling you, those your kids, you're in the golden decade right now. You're in the midst. Those are literally the best years, and everybody says that they're all great, but I don't buy that. I think some years are better than others. And you're in what I'd call the golden decade, sort of 4 to 14. And I sort of knew it. I mostly knew it, but I wish I'd known it more. And it imposed more rules on myself. Do you impose any sort of rules other than trying to spend time with them?
Yeah, I have a rule. I'm never too tired for my kids. So if I come home and my kids wanna have a baseball catch and I'm exhausted, I'm still having the baseball catch. Because if I'm too tired, when my kids want me, then my work-life balance is way out of whack. So rule number 1 for me is I'm never too tired for my kids. I have a lot of rules. I mean, a new one that I just did has nothing to do with time, but when my kids come into my room, if I'm on my phone, this is my office. My phone is my office. I don't go to an office. This is my office. So when my kids come in, if I'm on my phone, the old me would say, I would say, Give me 1 second, guys. Let me just finish this up. The new me puts my phone down so my kids know that they're more important than my phone. So that's been a big switch. I have a lot of guardrails around when I use my phone. So phone time at home. And all that said, my kids also know that mommy comes first. Like I've been told my whole life, your kids are kids come first. They don't. Like mommy and daddy have to be right or nothing's right. So, it's important for Sarah, my wife and I, for our kids to know, like, mommy and daddy come first. And then I'm a big show don't tell, like I include my kids. We have family dinners as much as we can. We don't say, well, we're gonna do it 4 times a week or as often as we humanly possibly can. We have family dinners and we talk about a lot of things. So we try to expose our kids to a lot of things and we ask them to share a lot of things. We have family meetings once a week. So we invest a lot in the family unit.
Can you describe, if it's not too personal? I love the idea of a family meeting, but I'm not entirely sure what's supposed to happen. I'm just curious. Give us a sense of what happens in your family meeting.
Yeah. So we get together and on Sundays and it's short and we just talk about something like one thing that happened to us this week. So my son might say, in school, I failed at this, I did this, I succeeded in this. If we have anything that we want to talk about, like summer plans or goals or whatever, we'll bring it up. It's a chance for everybody to kind of share, get up to speed, and like communicate in a group setting. Sometimes we take a vote if it's like, hey, we're thinking about going on a trip this year. That kind of stuff gets discussed. You know what it does, Scott? It allows everybody to be heard. I actually like it. And I'm not a great communicator. So for me, it's kind of challenging. But the other rule that we have is when we have guests at our dinner table, each of the kids has to ask the guest a question about them. So it gives them a chance to practice what I think is the most important thing, which is communication and public speaking. So that's another kind of rule that we have.
So we talked a little bit about fathering. What advice would you give to a young man who's just entering into a relationship and thinking about getting married? What do you know now that you wish you'd known earlier in your marriage?
Well, in my marriage, before I got married, we never talked about what do we want to feed our kids? Do we want our kids to go to temple or church or our religion? Like, where does religion come into play? And, um, where do we want our kids to go to school? Private school, public school? How are we going to, discipline our kids? What's our philosophy on discipline? Like, that never crossed my mind to talk to Sarah about until we had kids. You have to eat. I eat super healthy. Sarah eats like the other end of the spectrum. How do you want to raise our kids? So, like, we never had those conversations. And so it's just something to think about if you're getting married. Like, how aligned are you on certain things? And definitely how aligned are you on your values or whatever. As far as parenting, we try to praise the effort as much as we can and not the result. So, Charlie, not, "Oh, you scored 3 touchdowns," but, like, I love watching how hard you work on the field. Like, it's just I love how much, how you hustled today. Praising the effort is a big thing. We try to expose our kids to as many life experiences, different people as we can.
And so it sounds like you have a healthy relationship with your partner, good kids. You've obviously checked a lot of boxes as an entrepreneur. What's left for you? Like, what are you working on if you look out 10 years and you think this is really what I've liked to have done or accomplished that I haven't done or accomplished already? What is that or those things?
Feel like I'm finally at 55, I'm turning 56 in August, in the right lane. I do a lot of speaking and coaching, and I like it. I feel like I'm good at it. Um, I have a lot of experiences to share, and I just share my experiences in business and being a dad, all that stuff. But I also feel like I never really even talked about this, but I feel like I haven't really figured out exactly like that big thing I've done big things, but the big thing I'm supposed to do to really contribute like to the world. I don't think I've even hit that yet. So my eyes are always open for it. I don't know. I lost my dad, my mom, and my sister in the last 2 years, so it's changed my perspective a lot on a lot of different things, like what matters the most to me. When my mom died a month ago, and the night my sister had been living with my mom because, when my dad died, my sister moved into her house with and she would walk her to bed every night, and the night of Mother's Day, on the way to going to bed at, like, 11 o'clock, my mom stopped my sister and said, her name's Jana, my sister. She said, "Jana, get the nicest glassware that we have and get a bottle of champagne." So my sister got the glass, like, the nicest glasses in my mom's house. They poured a glass of champagne, and my mom doesn't even drink. They made a toast, and she never woke up. So it's like she, like, basically toasted her life on the last night of her life, which is amazing. But I think, like, when I think back to that, like, to live a life that you can toast, I don't know what I'm gonna do in 10 years. I have no idea. But if I had the last glass of champagne tonight, I mean, I'm toasting to an insanely amazing life already. So, it can only get better, I think. But I don't know what that looks like for me.
It's a nice way to go. It's unusual. It's as if your mother knew that that was it.
Yeah, it was unreal.
And having experienced that kind of loss in such a short, concentrated time period, I mean, obviously it's got to impact you emotionally, but has it impacted you in terms of how you approach relationships or what you're thinking about professionally or how you spend your time?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been good with spending my time. Like I said, I invest a lot in planning for like I plan most of my year in advance. I have this big calendar. I put as much of the things that I want to do in advance before I plan my work. I plan my life, trips, races, blah, 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 one-on-one trips with my kids. So like, and then I just kind of follow the script. But I think that what's changed is just a lot of the small things that used to like really spend a lot of energy on are just bounce off me.
And if you could give your 25-year-old self, say you had maybe 15 or 30 seconds with them, right? You find the time machine, that's the good news. The bad news is you only have 15 or 30 seconds with your 25-year-old self. What would you say to him?
I would probably say a quote that Gandhi had that I live by, which is learn like you'll live forever and live like you'll die tomorrow. I would tell my 25-year-old self to like learn, experience as much as you can, do as many things as you can, with the hope that those experiences will help you all the way down the line, but also live like you'll die tomorrow.
Jesse Itzler is a serial entrepreneur, a New York Times bestselling author, part owner of the Atlanta Hawks, and an ultramarathon runner. Most notably, Jesse sold his private jet company, Marquis Jet, to Berkshire Hathaway and his Zico coconut water brand to Coca Cola. His best selling books include Living with a Seal and Living with Monks. He joins us from his home in Atlanta. By the way, how did Atlanta happen? We didn't go there, Jesse.
Well, I was a New Yorker for 25 years. I met my wife. My wife was a customer of mine at Marquis Jet. That's where we met. And when we got engaged and were dating, her business, Spanx, was based in Atlanta. And we were splitting our time, and then we had a kid, and we're like, we got to pick. And Spanx was way more important than what I was doing. And I moved down to Atlanta. We never moved back.
I always say around big decisions, I'm an influencer, not a decision maker, and influencers being generous. Anyways, Jesse, I really enjoyed this conversation. Best to you and yours.